John Knocklinger, the men's divorce coach and mentor. If you'd like to learn more about our free men's divorce support group, you can go to mensdivorcenetwork.com. Today, my guest is Janet Philbin. She is a licensed clinical social worker for more than 30 years. She's a certified conscious parenting coach practitioner, which we're going to learn a little bit about today because I'm very curious what that is. She's a certified hypnotherapist, a certified master energy healer, and a certified intuitive counselor. She has a lot of certifications, as you already can see. She's an expert at helping parents uncover and heal the issues of their inner child, which may be influencing their adult life and parenting now. She's also the author of Show Up for Yourself, a guide to inner awareness and growth, which you can find on Amazon, and I'm sure is an incredible book. To learn more about Janet, you can go to janetphilbin.com, and on Instagram, you can follow her at Janet_Philbin_LCSW. Thank you so much for being here, Janet.
Thank you for having me, John. I'm excited.
I am too. You bring a perspective and a expertise that we have not had on the show yet. And as you and I discussed the other day when we had a phone call, I think what you teach, it would be particularly helpful to so many parents that are going through a divorce because of the impact it has on children. Now, I got to tell you, your website was so wonderful. I actually spent 2 hours reading blogs on your website this morning.
Wow.
I loved it. In fact, there was a blog, I think it was almost like interview format, and it's dated November 1st, 2021, which is today, even though this is not when our viewers are hearing it, about the 5 things you should do if you're experiencing work burnout. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I'm experiencing a little bit right now. I'm like, this was so timely to read. And I think so many people could benefit from it. So I encourage our listeners to go and check out your website. You got a lot of good stuff there.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. You never know what happens when someone goes to your website, right?
Well, it's true. It's true. I mean, I like real, like when people put real things up that really are helpful, like your blogs. They're really great. And your Instagram page has so many great quotes. I love them. There was one that I just was reading a minute ago. We form limiting beliefs about ourselves at a young age. These beliefs inform who you become and who you are today.
That's it.
Oh my gosh. It's interesting when you just think about it, just how powerful it is about, all of us adults, how so many things happened when we were children that really influence what we do today. I mean, it's amazing, but we're going to get into all of that today. So obviously this podcast is about divorce. So I want to talk to you today about how men need to look inward at themselves so that their children aren't caught in the crossfire of divorce, which is, at the end of the day, divorce is mostly emotional. And yes, there's financial parts to it, but it's mostly emotional. And because of that, children get caught in the middle so much. So I want to tackle that with you a little bit today. But before we get into that, what is a conscious parenting coach? What does that mean? And what is it that you do, Jen? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, thanks. So conscious parenting is a philosophy of parenting where you are really raising the parent. We are parenting alongside of our child as opposed to parenting over the child. So it is a place where we're honoring who our children are, what their spirit is, and we're fostering an environment for them to grow into their authentic self and pulling back and not imposing ourselves on them, because we believe that they are a sovereign being, and it's up to us as their parents to be their ushers or guides for them to get to know themselves and become who they were always meant to be, not what we want to impose onto them, what they think what we think they should be in order to be happy or successful, because those are really our definitions. And we don't want to impose our definitions of happy or success onto our children, because that will just set them up for failure. So being a conscious parent really means raising yourself as a parent so that you can be whole and complete, and we are not projecting our own shortcomings, judgments, and everything else we carry around, our woundedness, onto the child in front of us. So that's really what that means. I was trained by Dr. Shefali Sabari, who is a best-selling New York Times author and Oprah's favorite parenting expert, and she's one of the top in the field right now. And she has a coaching institute that anyone who's interested in this, men and women, can apply to also become a conscious parenting coach.
That's interesting. So, in terms of this process, and in terms of learning how to be a conscious parent, is this any different from what you would do as a therapist? What are the differences between what you do in this arena versus just therapy?
Oh, it's a really good question. You know, the difference between coaching and therapy is that coaching is in the moment, it's what's happening now in the present. You're not digging into someone's past. You might look at patterns and see, okay, well, that happened with your parents. Now, how is it showing up now in your life? Whereas in counseling or therapy, we are going back. We want to understand the emotional underpinnings, the emotional traumas, and how that happened in your life as a child, and how is that still happening in your life now. So coaching is more actionable in the present moment. Therapy is more healing modality from the past, bringing it into the present. So I combine all my worlds. I combine my clinical skills as a social worker, my clinical skills as a hypnotherapist, and the coaching skills I've developed over the last few years, because I just got my coaching certification 3 years ago, but it was really just a beautiful addition to all the skills that I already used with my clients.
Now, do you have any commonalities about the people that come to you for this coaching? Because this is something that most people probably aren't even aware of, that it even exists. I mean, how do people find you? And again, are there any commonalities to the people that do actually find you?
Well, I've really created a little bit of a niche, is how you say it, niche for myself, in that my specialty is really helping people heal their wounded inner child. So your own childhood wounds, emotional wounds, which still get played out and acted out now in your life. Conscious parenting is all about helping the parent recognize what those inner wounds are, and helping them talk through it and see how it's getting reenacted and played out with your child in front of you. I take it deeper, where I go back to the origin of the emotional injury and do healing at that point, as opposed to staying more present. So I take it back to the past and then I bring it into the present. So the people I tend to attract to me now are people that want to do deep healing work. They really feel they have deep emotional blocks, and other types of therapy or coaching they've done has not been so effective or have had long lasting results in helping them make real lasting change in their life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could benefit from this, even if you don't really think so. I mean, I know I have an 8-year-old, and I already can feel myself, wanting her to do the things that I like, and to be very conscious about not being my parents to her. And then you end up, still having some of those same patterns. So how difficult is it, Janet, to go and figure out what those wounds are, so that you can work with somebody to be a better parent?
Well, when you pay attention and are aware of what's coming up inside of you. So since you bring up your 8-year-old daughter, John, I always like to use what's being presented to me in the moment whenever I'm talking with someone. what's happening when you're like, "Ooh, I really want her to do it my way," because it's not about her, right? And you have enough awareness, I can tell, to know it's about you. So that's up to you in that moment to pause and say, "Okay, what just got activated within me that I want her to do it my way? What is my way? And what does that feel like in my body? How did I learn it? Was that something my parent imposed upon me because it was their way? And if I didn't do it their way, then maybe I would get rejected, I would get yelled at, I would get left behind, I was told I was wrong or not good enough. We learn it from somewhere. And we just keep perpetuating these patterns until we ourselves go, oh. And then we have to unwrap it for ourselves. And once we do that, there's no need anymore to project it onto our children, because the one that needs to heal is us. She's not doing anything wrong by doing it her way. We should be encouraging that and fostering that. Unless she's at risk of physically getting hurt, or we really see her going down a bad path, mental health wise, really with the wrong crowd of kids, really making bad choices that are going to hurt themselves. It's up to us to support our kids, even if it is not our way, because they're doing it their way for their reason, because that's in alignment with who they are, even though I may not be comfortable with that. But me not being comfortable with that is actually my problem, not theirs or not hers.
Yeah, I that makes total sense to me. But as you're talking, Janet, I
Mhm.
suspect that practically every parent does this
Oh,
in
yeah.
some way, shape, or form. So, from that perspective, it seems like everybody really could benefit from really addressing these issues. So,
Yeah.
are there any ways this manifests itself where it creates maybe a little bit more urgency that you need to sit down and work with someone like yourself so that you don't inadvertently damage your kids?
Yeah. Well, I think we all, myself included, inadvertently damage our kids. My kids are mostly big now. I have uh, two out of college and one who's a junior in high school. But it's never too late to become a conscious parent. It's never too late, because conscious parenting is all about connection, not correction. And so we need to be able to be connected with ourselves first, and then that enables us to be connected with our child. And the thing about it is, if you make a mistake, go back and say, "Yo, I really handled that bad. I thought about it and you were asking me one thing and I yelled at you. Or I took away your video game when you didn't empty the dishwasher. One thing has nothing to do with the other. I'm sorry. Here's your game back. Now you have to empty the dishwasher for 3 days instead of one," because that at least makes sense. The game had nothing to do with it. So we want to make sure we're providing learning opportunities. And when we find ourselves being too punitive, overly punitive, we're yelling all the time, we're always fighting with our kid, we hear ourselves saying, "Well, if you didn't do that, then I wouldn't," or "It's your fault I'm yelling at you. It's your fault you're getting punished." You listen to those statements that are kind of all or nothing when your kid really hasn't done anything wrong. It's all coming from you and your pain. And that's up to you to solve. That's up for you to fix, because they're not making you do anything. They can't make you feel any way. We can't make anyone feel anything. Something happens outside of us, we have a reaction to it. That's us. We have to own that feeling. So whether it's your spouse, because I know we're talking about divorce today, or your kids or your ex-spouse, how you react to something is yours. You don't get to blame anyone for it, because you and I, John, we could be in the same situation watching the same movie. You might laugh hysterical and I might burst into tears. The movie didn't make either one of us do that. What caused the reaction within each of us was the programming, was the story, was the attachments we already had to something we saw on the screen. And for you, it caused laughter, and for me, it caused tears. So no one made us do anything. It's our stuff. So we have to own it. So when you find yourself projecting onto the other with very having trouble with the word I want, you know, blaming, closed-ended, closed-minded, non-flexible ways of thinking, the problem lies within you, not the other person. And not that the other person, not a child, an adult, isn't co-creating it, because we all co-create our realities, but you have to own your stuff. And until you're willing to own your stuff, what the heck can change? Everyone has some culpability in each interaction with one another.
That's so powerful, Janet. As you were sitting there talking, I just realized how often I do all the things you were just talking about. Whenever daughter does something she's not supposed to do, I take away her iPad. You're absolutely right. It's the kind of thing that I think most parents do, but I mean, that basically is things we learned from our parents,
Exactly.
and it's like perpetuating. So I almost look at what you're talking about as like breaking the cycle.
Exactly. That's right.
Yes. So I'm wondering, you said it's never too late, no matter how old your kids are. But have you noticed at all that if someone gets this kind of counseling and coaching when a child is really young, that they do end up having a much healthier time, particularly like during those difficult times, like the teenage years and whatnot? Because I know most parents just become exasperated and they don't know what to do anymore, and that's where the yelling comes from. Because kids just communicate differently than we do. But like, what would be the best age to sort of go through this kind of coaching for actually a long-term happiness for your kids, where it would also maybe imprint on them so they'll do it with their own children?
Well, we're doing it for long-term happiness for us, not for our kids. We're doing it so we don't project our wounds onto them, because conscious parenting is for everyone, because each of us had parents. So if you've ever had a parent, then you're in need of conscious parenting, because it's not for your kids. So that's the first thing we have to understand. It's not for your kids. The minute your children are born, before your children are born, right? Even when your wife is pregnant, right? You already have all sorts of dreams and expectations about who this kid inside is going to be. So if you like a specific baseball team, I don't know where you live, but you're a diehard fan, well, your kid is going to come out wearing that jersey. Well, what if they don't like baseball? So it's already, our projections are starting. So it's never too early to start to heal yourself. Your children are never too young for you to start working on this, because this way you can always meet your child where they're at. But it's also never too late, because I can own my stuff with my older children. And now, like my almost 17-year-old, she was about 11 when I picked up my first book of Dr. Shefali's The Awakened Family. It's like this big. It's like 230 some odd pages. And I read it in 2.5 weeks. I was like, oh my God, where were you when my older two were younger? I needed this then. But I started immediately just applying what I learned in a book. And within 2 weeks, my 11-year-old was freaking out, going, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Why are you talking about feelings all the time? Like, I changed everything. And she felt it. But there's been such a shift. And now she calls me out on it and goes, oh, that's not very conscious parenting of you. What would Dr. Shefali say if she heard you say that, Mom? Right? So she knows. And I don't have a relationship with an almost 17-year-old where we're yelling and screaming at each other. Do we get upset? Yes. Does she have her teenage-ness? Of course. But I know that that's not me, that's her. And if we do get into it, we can go back and correct it. So that's the important thing. And so wouldn't that be great to be able to hold space for a 2-year-old who's having a tantrum and not react, and just know, it's okay, have your tantrum. I'll be here when you're done. And not get triggered by it. But that's not what parents do. They yell back at their kid who's yelling and screaming, and You have two dysregulated people yelling at each other. It just doesn't work. So it's never too early, to do this while your partner is pregnant or before you have children or when you first get married or when you first think about having children, because it's not about the kids, it's about you. It's about becoming a healthy adult. And when we're healthy adults, we'll raise emotionally healthy children.
That's wonderful. I'm guilty, Janet. I did buy my daughter before she was born Texas A&M gear, which is where I went to undergrad. She's also wears Astros gear, which, I'm from Houston. So we all do that, right?
All of us, yeah.
And the other place that I see it a lot is like political ideology. Like parents really want their kids to believe the same things they do. And I see parents get really upset when, kids change their mind as they get older. But and I also wish I had talked to you when my daughter was 1 or 2, because I did all the things that you were just talking about. The yelling, the screaming, and I'm not a yeller. And there's still times where, in response to yelling from a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, I yell back. So you're absolutely right. There's a way to react that's a lot better. But in the context that we're talking today, you're dealing with people that not only do they need to learn, about their own wounds so they can be a more conscious parent with their kids, but they're going through a divorce. They're going through a situation where the family's in turmoil anyway, because the parents are breaking up and the kids are sort of sitting there in the crossfire. So in that context, let's talk about, obviously this program is for men, but we can talk about men and women. I think it benefits everybody. Is that a good time to be going through this kind of coaching when you're also going through a divorce? Or would you recommend someone maybe get through the divorce and then go through the coaching?
I think that as soon as you realize you're struggling, it's time to go through the coaching. It's, if you're contemplating divorce, and because I know I've listened to a lot of your podcast episodes, and I hear you talk to your audience about have a plan, be prepared. If you think your spouse is not getting prepared, you're wrong, right? So it's about, and it's exactly what you try to teach your clients, if I'm understanding you correctly, is be emotionally prepared. So the goal, right, is to get through that divorce as emotionally intact as possible, and to have your children get through the divorce as emotionally intact as possible. So the way to do that is to understand yourself, your motivations, and your pain points. Because if you know what's yours and you know what's your spouse's or soon to be ex-spouse's, then you don't have to take your children and make them pawns in the middle of he said, she said. And I think that's usually the most damage that happens to children. They feel like they have to take sides. I don't want to lose daddy's love. I don't want to lose mommy's love. I don't want mommy to be mad at me. I don't want daddy to be mad at me. Okay, I won't tell mommy's secret. I won't tell daddy's secret. Don't tell your kids adult things. It's none of their business. You deal with your stuff. Don't put your kids in the middle. The kids haven't put themselves in the middle. They didn't ask to be born to the two of you. You put them in the world. So now it's your responsibility to make sure you're creating an emotionally healthy, safe space, which means bringing neutrality to your children when it comes to the divorce proceedings. Just this is something that's happening between mommy and daddy, and you will not be in the middle of it. We'll tell you what's going on, depending on the ages and stages of the kids, right? You're not going to tell a 5-year-old the same thing you're going to tell a 12-year-old. So you're going to tell them honestly, but in developmentally appropriate ways, but without an agenda that you want them to react or respond a certain way or be angry at your spouse because of whatever went down in the marriage, to take your side.
So, well, yeah, I was going to, but in this context of divorce, obviously you've got two parents that are, not on the same page anymore.
Uh-huh.
But I actually have this question regardless whether you're married happily
Mhm.
or you're getting divorced. How does this work if both parents are not both engaged in coaching? I know it's about you and about you being a better parent yourself, but is it as effective if the other parent isn't also engaged in some level of coaching as well?
Well, it only takes one parent to have an effect. Very rarely are both people on the same page at the same time. Usually one person's out front and the other one's dragging behind for whatever the issue is, in the marriage and in the divorce. If that was the pattern in the marriage, it's going to be the pattern in the divorce, right? It's not going to shift. It's just power over, power under. And people tend to do that to their children. So if you're the one that's going to be aware and conscious and mindful, then that's how you show up for your kids. And if your partner is not, you just be that steady for your kids. And even if your partner is not, you don't badmouth your partner to the kids and say, well, your father or your mother doesn't understand the way I do things. However, that's not what you do. You just be that steady for your kids. You be the truth sayer, but again, with neutrality, without blaming the partner. Because you're going to be divorced from that partner one day, right? But that partner is always going to be the other parent to your child. So why would you want to create a situation where your child is torn between the two of you, or where they don't like their other parent? If the other parent's going to be that much of a jerk, trust me, your kid will figure it out eventually, because the parent's going to prove it to the kid. So you be the steady.
That's fascinating. I guess the other part of this too is there a role for the child in coaching, or is this really a situation where child has nothing to do with this? It's just you as a parent, and your child shouldn't even know that you're engaged in any kind of coaching because you're just going to change your behavior, which will hopefully change their interaction with you.
Well, yes, you're right. When you change yourself and the way you interact with your children, they will improve. However, when it comes to divorce, if your child is struggling, I would recommend them going to a therapist or a coach that's specialized on children of that mental age, right? Because someone who works with a 15-year-old might not be the right person to work with a 5-year-old. I personally don't work with children. So if my clients have kids that need support, I get them to someone who specializes in working with kids. It's not my thing. So, and make sure you go with someone who's not like, oh yeah, I'll work with everyone. I'm great with everyone. No one's great with everyone. I would run from that person. So,
Yeah, well, that's absolutely. I always use the analogy that, you don't go to a general practitioner to have heart surgery. I mean, you need to go to someone who really specializes in what they do. I got to tell you, everyone going through any major life event, whether it's divorce, sometimes it's the death of someone close to you, whatever the case is, really could benefit from having somebody to talk to. And that somebody depends on your circumstances, like you were just talking about. Um, but one thing, Janet, is
mhm.
men don't ask for help. Men have a huge problem of asking for help. So to the men that are listening, how can we convince them that going through this conscious parenting coaching really is going to really benefit them? Because a lot of them, I can tell you, because I work with men all the time, I can't even get them to go to a therapist just to talk through their feelings. And so I know a lot of men will take the approach of, if they go to someone like yourself to get this kind of coaching, there's some kind of admission that they're, a bad parent or they're less than. And I can tell you, because I talk to a lot of men, that's a man's mentality. So how do we convince them this is really good for them?
I'm going to ask your listeners that to take a moment and just sit with themselves and be honest with themselves and ask what inside hurts. What's hurting inside? Because if something inside is hurting you, it's hurting your heart, you're in pain, your stomach's always upset, you have headaches, you're always stressed out, you have high blood pressure, or you're not doing good self-care, eating foods that aren't good for you, not exercising, drinking too much, then a part of you is in pain. And that part is a younger self, your own little boy that's hurting. And every little boy deserves to be heard. You know, we're taught in society, we teach our boys don't cry. Boys don't share their feelings. Men suck it up. Well, all of those things you were told, if those were the things you were told are lies, all of those things really just hurt you. And so the hurt little boy inside of you is actually the hurt adult in your life now. So if you want to feel better, if you want to do better, if you want your next relationship to be different than the one you're getting out of, if you want to improve your relationship with your children and not have them repeat the same patterns, especially if you have boys, then help yourself. Because, you know, in order to be brave, we need to be able to be vulnerable, because we can't be brave if we're not vulnerable. And asking for help, I know, is so scary. But once you do, once you could just say, you know what, I need help, and you reach out to that person who you feel in alignment with, who can hear you, who can hold space for you, you will begin to feel so much better. Because I wonder in your life, when was it you ever really felt heard or safe enough to share your feelings, or even honor them and acknowledge them within yourself? So that's what I would say to all your listeners out there, John, who are guys.
I'm going to package up that response and I'm going to send it to people, because I just, that was really powerful, Janet. I mean, I think that, you know, talking about how men are taught not to cry, I mean, this is just a corollary of that. You know, not crying, asking for help is like crying. It's the same thing for a lot of guys. And a lot of men too these days are already feeling like, you know, they're going to have issues with custody and having their children, because they already feel like as a father they're going to have some kind of their ex-wife's going to have some kind of upper hand, and it really causes a lot of anxiety. But of course, what ends up happening is they overcompensate. They do things to their kids, for their kids, that are counterproductive. And if they could just learn to be more of a conscious parent, they would find they probably would have a much better relationship with their kids. And I think that at the end of the day, if you want a good relationship with your kids, you have to work on yourself first. And I think
Right.
it's the thinking that didn't exist, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that I know these days people are really focusing in on working on yourself, working on your own mindset, and how everyone gets in the way, in the way of themselves. And that's why we don't go forward. So do you work with a lot of men, or do you find that women are more the people that come to you? What's your split in terms of who you work with?
Yeah, I would say I have like a 70-30 split, you know, probably 70% women, 30% men. But I'll tell you, I love when the men come to me because they're so ready. But it's unfortunate because by the time they're so ready, they're in so much pain, like to the point where they just don't know what to do anymore. Their anxiety levels are so high. They're not sleeping. They just don't know what to do. They're lost. They're yelling at their kids all the time. They were already divorced and now their life is falling apart. It's not how they thought it would be. So come sooner. Reach out to anyone. If you don't want to work with a coach, someone on your insurance plan who's a therapist. You know, there are people that specialize in working with men. There's help out there for everybody, and there's support for you. That's why I wrote my book, John, because I can't like be there for everyone. And some people, they're afraid to reach out for help. So I wrote my book, Show Up for Yourself, so people can do the journey on their own. And it guides you through that journey.
I also noticed you've got some courses on your website that
Yeah,
people should
I
take
do.
out.
Hmm.
So, well, I mean, listen, men again, they just have a hard time asking for help. But I know that something that's really scary when you enter any of these coaching programs, therapy, anything, is people just don't even know what to expect. It's like the unknown. And so they don't even want to do it. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about, at least in your office, what does your conscious parenting coaching program look like? What is it that someone would go through as they're
Hmm.
going through this coaching program?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to me is I want to know what's going on in your life. The past at this moment doesn't matter. When you first sit down with me, our first appointment, and what's happening now that brought you to me today. And once we understand that, then I'm going to start understanding your family dynamics. Now, your family dynamics when you were growing up. Um, and we just start deconstructing it. It's a conversation of me getting to understand you, and as I get to understand you, helping you connect the dots to understand yourself, because we can understand everything when we look backwards and say, oh, I now I see why that happened, now I can understand why that happened. And when we can look back and understand it, then we can see how it's playing out in our life now. So if you were always afraid you were going to get rejected when you were a child if you showed your feelings, you may have built up such an emotional wall around you now as, say, a 35-year-old man, that you don't let your children or your spouse get close to you because you're afraid if you let them in, they will reject you. When all they really want is to let you know they love you or to be loved themselves. But you've been so afraid of rejection your whole life, you've totally protected yourself with a big giant wall, and now the relationship falls apart. Your children don't tell you things, and you wonder why. It's because you're still in self-protection mode. That's just your inner child, just trying to create ways to feel safe. So we look at the patterns and we deconstruct them. And because I'm also a therapist, I dig into them. And we heal. We just heal. And it's just a step-by-step process. And we journal and do other exercises that help you get there.
So you mentioned that you're a therapist in the
Mhm.
context of coaching. Does that mean you kind of do a hybrid approach where you do some coaching and some therapy?
Yeah, you know what, I've been doing this for so long that everything I've been trained in, it's all in one big melting pot now. And sometimes you might get everything in one session, and sometimes I'm just pulling out this or using that. So it depends. And if I have someone who's coming to me for inner child healing hypnotherapy, then we're doing hypnosis, we're doing inner child healing, but within that, I'm using the coaching skills, I'm using my clinical skills, using my knowledge deeper, my knowledge of how to heal the inner child, my training in trauma work. So it's hard to separate because it's just the way I work. It's very eclectic. I'm very eclectic. So I don't say no, I only do this kind of therapy or that modality or this philosophy. I don't think there's any one right way because there's something different for every person. So I can't if every person is different, it would be a disservice to someone to only approach them with one way.
Well, it sounds like you're a good person to have in your corner,
Thanks.
Janet. I mean, I like that because it really, and this is why people that have been around a while and have a lot of experience and have done all these different kinds of trainings are so helpful for people because you can take from each little part and really put together something that is really specific for that person and what they need at that point. But in
Mhm.
terms of how the process works, procedurally, let's say, is this kind of like therapy where you work with someone once a week, or what exactly do you do?
100%. Yeah, so coaching or therapy would be either once a week or every other week. I personally don't recommend people going longer than every other week because you lose continuity and you lose the intensity. Then it's like you're only going once a month or once every 3 weeks. What were we talking about last time? And you feel like you have to start over again. So once a week is ideal. Every other week, still effective. Less than that, I don't recommend.
Do you do only an in person, or do you do virtual as well?
I Yeah, I mean, before the pandemic, I was 90% in person. I'm actually in my office now. My office is not in my home right now. But now I do 90% virtual, and I have, one or two people that come into my office to see me in person because I actually have clients that are all around the world right now. So even if I sit here, like this morning, I had someone from another country. So it wouldn't matter if I was sitting here in my office or my office in my home, we'd still be over video doing the sessions. Just as effective as in person. You don't have to be in the same physical place as your coach or your therapist. Coaching traditionally has been, before the days where everyone was using Zoom on the phone. Now I think most coaches are doing Zoom. So,
I
or a
agree.
Zoom like video.
Uh,
Yeah.
I agree with you, Janet. I also coach men all over the world, and it's
Mhm.
just as effective over Zoom. I have a feeling that's where we're going. It's going to just be common that
Yeah.
people just don't do in person anymore, although there's something that's missing from that in person.
Mhm.
Um, but whatever, it is what it is, right?
Yeah,
So, well, that's interesting. So that means that anyone who's listening that's interested in this can reach out to you. It doesn't matter where they live.
that's
You
right.
would be able to help them.
Yeah, that's right. All they have to do is go to my website, and I do a free consultation, and they just have to fill out that little form.
So, how long do you normally work with somebody? I know it's probably changes for every person, but maybe an average.
It depends. It depends on what they're coming to me for. If they're coming for traditional insight oriented talk therapy, I've had people stay from as short as 6 months to as long as 10 years. Um, it's just the way therapy works sometimes, depending on the person. Not my favorite way to do it because I think that we're not getting to the work. Coaching, usually we're talking 12 sessions on average, I would say, maybe to 20, depending on what the issue is. But when I do a deep inner child healing with people, I've yet to do more than 13 sessions because the healing is that deep and it's that transformative. The average is 6. Sometimes we get to 6 sessions and people are like, these 2 more little issues came up. Can we do 2 more sessions? Sure, we'll do 2 more. But honestly, we can get so much done in 3. And if someone's willing to give me a 6-session commitment, what we can get done in 6 sessions is amazing because we're going back to the origin of the problem. We're finding that inner child that was injured, where understanding what their belief systems were, what the pain points were, what the decisions were that they made, how it's affecting you in your life now. We're rescuing that inner child and letting them know they're safe now. They don't have to adult anymore. They can just be 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 12, however old they were. And then we're putting new coping skills in place going forward. So the old ones don't need to be used anymore. They're really outdated, but the unconscious mind has no sense of time. So it doesn't know you're a 35-year-old man. It still thinks you're 5. And when you don't get your way, you have a temper tantrum. So your 5-year-old self inside is actually the one arguing with the 5-year-old in front of you, or maybe even your wife or your husband or your partner, whomever. We react from a place of the wounded inner child. When we respond, we're in the adult self. So we always want to find a way to get to the place where we can be responsive as opposed to reactive. So the inner child healing work I do, that's what brings that transformation. I think quick can you get with that? Will therapy get you there? Yes. As quickly? Not in my experience. Sorry.
So whenever you're getting to these injuries from people's childhood, are there any common ones that you see over and over again?
Yeah. not feeling lovable, not feeling loved. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. Something is wrong with me. I can't do anything right. I'm not smart enough. Just the list can go on and on. But usually, I'm not worthy is there because it can be developed from any kind of family dynamic where you feel just not cared about, not as important as other people in the family. You go into survival mode because maybe someone had an addiction history, maybe there was physical, verbal violence in the house, maybe your own parents divorced and it wasn't processed. So we all have childhood trauma to some degree or another. And trauma, Gabor Mate, who is a Canadian physician and trauma specialist, he used to be a pediatrician, but now he's a trauma specialist. He's amazing. He says that trauma is what happens inside of us as a result of what happened on the outside of us. So things are going to happen outside of us, but it becomes trauma because of the way we have internalized it. And then usually as children, we're not given the opportunity to process it. So when you don't have the opportunity to process it, to talk about it, to integrate it, it becomes trauma that we hold. And that's what affects us. And that's what informs and forms our coping skills and strategies and decisions and feelings about ourselves. And that's what gets played out in all our adult relationships. That's what I think we have to heal at the origin. Not everyone's ready to do that, and that's okay. That's okay. We just have to understand ourselves better. And you could do that with a good, skilled coach or therapist too.
Yeah, I've heard. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that work on, your core wounds and all of those sorts of things. But I love this connection, though, specifically to your children. It is something that is so important. I really feel like people that are going through a divorce, if they really would benefit from this, just because you're not. Sometimes people rely upon their co-parent a little too much in a marriage to help with things. Like if a child's misbehaving, maybe dad just goes down to the basement and lets mom deal with it, or whatever the case is. You really need to figure this out, because when people are getting divorced, they're going to be single parents. They're going to need to learn how to deal with their children by themselves on their own. And I know that just, to me, feels like a need to do this sort of coaching. And everyone listening, you just heard Janet say this isn't, you're not necessarily signing up for a year or two. You're talking about a couple of months of really intense coaching to find, these injuries you had as a child, these core wounds, so that you can, be a better person for your kids and have a better relationship with them.
Exactly. And it all comes down to having a better relationship with yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think most of us need to do that.
Yes, I agree. Myself
Yeah,
included.
absolutely. Oh yeah. Well, you never end.
Done.
You never end. I joke, it's the whole adage that therapists have therapists, coaches have coaches, because we all, if you're not growing, you're dying. You need to always find ways to improve yourself. And most people don't. Most of the world just kind of waddles through life, and they don't really think about any of these things. And then inadvertently you're causing damage that you're not even conscious of. To your kids, to people around you, and to yourself. And I just think it's so important. I was really excited to hear about this, Janet, because it's something I actually had never heard of before. And I have, I've been in, the coaching space, a divorce attorney. I've just never heard of it, but it is so fascinating to link, looking back at your core wounds and your core injuries as a child to how you deal with your own children. That connection makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
And I really hope that people that are listening to this really consider whether or not this would help you. And the answer, just to give you all The easy answer, yes, everybody would benefit from this. I can't imagine anyone who wouldn't benefit from this. I think any parent, if you've just been screaming at your kid, and they throw something at you, so you throw something at them, or you throw something on the ground, or you pick up something, you slam it, or you slam a door. You are, that inner child, as you just said, Janet, your 5-year-old self is interacting with the 5-year-old sitting in front of you. It makes so much sense to me that people should be working with you.
Thank you so much. Aw.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So Janet already said it before, but her website is janetphilbin.com. We'll put it, it should be on your screen right now. If you're watching this, it'll be in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast. And again, go to her Instagram page and follow her. Janet_Philbin_LCSW. I really like Instagram pages where people give you those inspirational quotes, and things just to really remind you to keep your head up and to keep moving forward. I think those are always inspirational. So I really love that, Janet.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So thank you so much for being here. And again, if you want to work with Janet, give her an email or a call. All of her information will be on her website. And we'll see everyone next time.